It was the final weekend of October when Sarah and her boyfriend, Mark, craved an escape from their hectic urban lives. They settled on a camping trip to a remote corner of the Pacific Northwest, a dense forest where towering pines choked out sunlight and cell signals died miles back. Friends had warned them it was isolated, but that was the appeal, a weekend alone, surrounded by nature's quiet embrace. The drive was long, their old sedan rattling along a twisting dirt road until they reached a clearing near a small, gurgling creek. They unloaded their gear with a mix of excitement and relief, the air sharp with pine and damp earth. Sarah pounded tent stakes into the ground while Mark stacked firewood, their laughter echoing faintly as they joked about surviving without technology. The afternoon slipped away in a blur of setup and exploration, the forest feeling like a private sanctuary. As twilight descended, a chill wrapped around the campsite. Sarah zipped up her hoodie, noticing wisps of fog slinking between the trees, soft and ghostly. She dismissed it. Fog was common here, especially near water, but as night fell, it thickened into a suffocating shroud. The creek vanished from sight, the fire pit blurred into a hazy outline just steps from their tent. Inside, they burrowed into sleeping bags, the damp seeping through the nylon, a clammy reminder of their isolation. That's when Sarah caught it, a whisper, faint and fleeting, like a voice lost in the wind. She tilted her head, listening harder. It came again, drifting through the trees, too distinct to ignore. "Mark, do you hear that?" she asked, her voice low. He paused, adjusting his flashlight, then nodded slowly. "Just the breeze," he said, but his furrowed brow betrayed doubt. The whispers swelled as midnight approached, no longer solitary but a chorus, overlapping murmurs that circled the tent, rising and falling like a distant crowd. Sarah's skin crawled, her mind painting shadowy figures lurking in the fog. Mark flicked on the flashlight, its beams slicing through the tent's mesh window, but the light drowned in the misty void, revealing nothing. "There's no one out there," he muttered, though his grip tightened on the handle. A loud crack shattered the tension, a branch snapping nearby, sharp and deliberate. Sarah's heart thudded, her fingers digging into Mark's arm. "Probably a deer," he whispered, but his eyes flicked nervously toward the sound. The whispers grew chaotic, a frenzied argument in an unintelligible tongue, pressing closer until they seemed to seep through the tent walls. Then chaos erupted. A low growl rumbled from the fog, followed by the frantic rustling of leaves. Before they could react, a massive, snarling dog, wild and matted, burst through the mist, its jaws snapping. Sarah screamed as it lunged at Mark, sinking its teeth into his calf. He yelled, kicking at the beast, blood soaking his jeans as the animal tore at him. Sarah grabbed a heavy stick from their gear, swinging wildly until the dog yelped and bolted back into the fog, its growls fading. Mark clutched his leg, groaning, the wound deep and ragged. "We need a hospital," Sarah said, panic rising. They stumbled to the car, abandoning their camp, the whispers haunting their retreat as they sped towards civilization. The silence after the dog's attack was deafening, broken only by Mark's pained gasps as Sarah floored the gas pedal. The fog clung to the road, headlights barely piercing the gray curtain, but she drove on instinct, her hands trembling on the wheel. Mark pressed a torn shirt against his leg, blood seeping through, his face pale and slick with sweat. "It came out of nowhere," he muttered, voice shaky. Sarah nodded, her mind replaying the snarling jaws, the whispers that had preceded it. Had they drawn the beast to them? The nearest hospital was an hour away, a small rural facility, but it was their only option. She kept glancing at Mark, terrified he'd pass out, the car's heater doing little to warm the chill that had settled into her bones. They reached the hospital just before dawn, the fog thinning as they pulled into the empty lot. Nurses rushed Mark into the ER, stitching his leg and pumping him with antibiotics while Sarah paced the waiting room, exhaustion warring with adrenaline. Hours later he was stable, moved to a quiet ward for observation. Sarah sat by his bed, the sterile white room a stark contrast to the wild forest they'd fled. Mark drifted in and out of sleep, medicated and groggy, while she stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the night's terror. The whispers, the fire, the dog, it all felt like a nightmare bleeding into reality. She tried to rest, leaning back in the stiff chair, but her nerves were raw. Around dusk, as the ward grew silent, Sarah noticed a shift in the air, a cold draft despite the closed windows. Mark was asleep, his breathing steady, when she saw it, a shadow on the wall opposite his bed. It wasn't cast by anything in the room, no lights, no objects, just a tall, indistinct figure, wavering like smoke. Her breath caught, her body freezing as the shadow moved, gliding soundlessly toward Mark's bed. It wasn't a trick of the light, it had depth, a presence, its edges flickering as if alive. She blinked hard, hoping it was exhaustion, but it lingered, hovering over him. A faint whisper echoed in her ears, not the chorus from the forest, but a single, mournful voice, too soft to understand. Her heart raced, and she reached for Mark's hand, squeezing it to wake him, but he didn't stir. The shadow stretched, its form sharpening for a moment, a gaunt face, hollow eyes, before dissolving as footsteps approached. A nurse entered, checking Mark's chart, oblivious to the fading presence. Sarah stammered, "Did you see that?" But the nurse frowned, seeing nothing unusual. When Mark woke later, she told him, her voice trembling. He looked uneasy but blamed the drugs. They left the hospital the next day, his leg bandaged, her nerves frayed. Back home, Sarah researched the forest, finding old forums mentioning disappearances, hikers vanishing, strange sightings, whispers in the fog. One post chilled her, a ranger's tale of a camper mauled by a wild dog decades ago, left for dead, his body never found. She thought of the shadow in the hospital, its ghostly gaze, and wondered if they'd brought something back with them. They'd never camped again, and Mark still limps when it rains. Jake and his sister Emily, avid hikers, chose a remote Appalachian valley for a July camping trip, seeking solitude in its wild depths. They arrived at dusk, set up camp near a stream, and settled in for a quiet night. That's where the normalcy ended. As the fire crackled, Jake felt it, a prickling sensation, like unseen eyes boring into him. He scanned the trees, seeing nothing but shadows, and brushed it off. Emily was already in her tent, so he doused the flames and crawled into his own, the forest silence pressing down. Then it began, a wet, guttural breathing, close enough to raise the hairs on his neck. He froze, clutching his sleeping bag, as the sound circled his tent, slow, deliberate, like a predator sniffing its prey. It stopped near the entrance, and something heavy pressed against the nylon, bowing it inward. A low growl rumbled, vibrating through the ground, followed by a sharp rip, claws tearing a gash in the fabric. Jake stifled a yell, grabbing his knife, but the presence retreated, leaving a jagged hole and a faint, rancid stench. He stumbled out at dawn, pale and trembling, to find Emily staring at her own tent. It was shredded, claw marks slashing through the sides, yet she'd slept through it all. Around their camp, the ground was littered with animal tracks, too large, too distorted to match anything familiar. "We need to go," Jake said, but Emily, stubborn, insisted it was just a bear. They stayed, reinforcing their tents with rope, though Jake's gut screamed to run. The day passed uneasily, the valley's beauty soured by dread. As night fell, they built a roaring fire, huddling close, but the breathing returned, louder, joined by a second source, then a third. Eyes flickered in the dark, yellow, unblinking, dozens of pairs ringing the campsite, hovering at unnatural heights. Jake's flashlight caught glimpses, twisted limbs, matted fur, faces too long and wrong to be animals. A scream pierced the night, not theirs. It came from the trees, shrill and human-like, cut off by a wet crunch. The eyes shifted, some vanishing, others drifting closer. Something massive lumbered just beyond the firelight, its silhouette hunched and grotesque, dragging what sounded like a limp body through the underbrush. Emily whispered, "What the hell is that?" as a metallic tang, blood, hit the air. The fire flared unnaturally, spitting embers, and a severed hand landed at Jake's feet, fingers twitching, nails caked with dirt. He gagged, kicking it away, as the breathing turned to laughter, deep, guttural, echoing from every direction. They were surrounded, trapped by whatever hunted this valley, and it wasn't done playing. The hand lay there, pale and trembling, until the fire's heat curled its fingers into a claw. Jake retched, his mind reeling, while Emily grabbed a stick, shoving the thing into the flames. The laughter swelled, a chorus of rasping voices, as the eyes tightened their circle. Shadows writhed in the dark, tall, misshapen figures with too many joints, their movements jerky and wrong. A stench rolled in, rotting meat and wet fur, choking the air. Jake swung his flashlight, catching a glimpse, a face, half-furred, half-skinned, with a gaping maw of jagged teeth, before it melted back into the night. "We're not alone," Emily hissed, her voice breaking. The fire dimmed, starved of oxygen, as if the things were suffocating it. Then came the howls, shrill, overlapping, shredding the silence. Something slammed into Jake's tent, collapsing it, and he heard the fabric tear as claws raked through. Emily yanked him back, her eyes wild. "Run!" she screamed, but the ground shook with footsteps, dozens, hundreds, closing in. A figure lunged from the trees, 7 feet tall, its flesh peeling in strips, eyes glowing like coals. It swiped at Emily, claws grazing her arm, drawing blood. She yelped, stumbling. As Jake swung his knife, slashing air, the thing was already gone, melting into the dark. They sprinted for the stream, splashing through icy water, the howls chasing them. Behind, the campsite erupted in chaos, tents shredded, gear scattered, the fire snuffed out by a wave of dirt. A child's cry rang out, high and desperate, though no child had been with them. Jake glanced back, seeing a small figure crawling from the wreckage, naked, eyeless, its mouth stretched in a silent scream, before it was dragged into the shadows by unseen hands. His stomach lurched, bow rising, as Emily pulled him up the valley's slope. The eyes followed, darting between trees, some now blood-red, pulsing with hunger. Halfway up, a trap snapped shut, vines, impossibly strong, lashed around Jake's ankle, yanking him down. He clawed the dirt, screaming, as Emily hacked at them with her pocket knife, the vines bleeding a thick, black sap. The ground beneath rumbled, splitting open, and skeletal hands, human, decayed, clutched at his legs. "They're under us!" he yelled, kicking free as Emily hauled him up. The valley itself seemed alive, groaning, the air thick with whispers of names, Jake, Emily, in voices either recognized. At the ridge, they collapsed, the car in sight, but the howls stopped. Silence fell, oppressive and final. They drove off, bloodied and shaking, the valley a dark smear in the rearview. Later, Jake found a ranger's report online. The valley was a mass grave, settlers slaughtered by something not of this world. Centuries ago, their bodies never recovered. Locals called it cursed, claiming the ground ate the living. Emily's arm scarred, and Jake still hears that laughter in his nightmares, waking to find scratches on his floor, fresh, deep, and unexplained. They burn their gear, but the eyes linger in every shadow. Late August found Mia and her cousin Ryan camping in Black Pine Hollow, a forgotten ravine in the Ozarks. They pitched their tent in a clearing, the pine trees gnarled and looming, and planned a quick overnight before hiking out. Night fell fast, and with it came the terror. Mia woke to scratching, frantic, clawing sounds outside her tent. She nudged Ryan, who was already sitting up, eyes wide. "You hear that?" she whispered. He nodded, grabbing a flashlight. The scratching circled them, a skittering rhythm like nails on bone, too fast for anything human. Ryan unzipped the tent, peering out, and froze. "Mia," he rasped. "Look!" She crawled beside him, heart pounding. The clearing was alive, hundreds of handprints pressed into the dirt, small and skeletal, overlapping in a frantic spiral around their tent. They hadn't been there at dusk. The air stank of rot, thick and cloying, as the scratching intensified, now on the tent itself, tiny gashes appearing in the fabric. Ryan swung the flashlight, its beam catching movement, a figure, child-sized, scuttling on all fours, its skin gray and stretched tight over jagged bones. It darted behind a tree, but its eyes, milky, glowing, lingered, locked on them. More emerged, crawling from the shadows, their limbs bending wrong, mouths gaping in silent shrieks. Mia stifled a scream as one lunged, slamming into the tent, its claws ripping a hole. Ryan kicked at it, connecting with something brittle that cracked like dry wood. It shrieked, a high, piercing wail, and retreated, but the others closed in, their numbers swelling. The ground trembled, a low moan rising from the earth, and the handprints began to shift, sinking deeper as if pulled downward. They grabbed their packs, bolting from the tent as it collapsed under clawing hands. The creatures swarmed unnaturally fast, their wails blending into a deafening chorus. Mia tripped, her ankle twisting, and a cold, bony grip latched onto her leg. She screamed, kicking free, leaving her shoe in its grasp as Ryan hauled her up. The flashlight beam caught a nightmare, dozens of the things, some dragging decayed limbs, others eyeless, all crawling from a gaping hole in the clearing's center, a pit that hadn't been there hours ago. A rancid wind blasted from it, carrying whispers, "Stay, stay," in voices too young, too broken. They ran, the hollow's edge in sight, but the ground split behind them, roots bursting up like tendrils, snapping at their heels. The forest fought them every step. Roots coiled around Mia's legs, thorns tore at Ryan's arms, and the wails grew louder, a wall of sound pressing them back. The creatures scuttled closer, their gray flesh peeling, revealing black, oozing sores. One leapt, landing on Ryan's back, its claws sinking into his shoulder. He roared, slamming himself against a tree, crushing it with a sickening crunch. It fell, twitching, black fluid pooling beneath, but more took its place, their milky eyes glowing in the dark. Mia swung her pack, knocking one aside, its skull shattering like porcelain. "The car!" she yelled, spotting the trail's end through the trees. The pit's pull grew stronger, a suction dragging leaves and dirt into its maw. The whispers turned to screams, "Don't leave us," and Mia saw shapes in the hole, skeletal arms, child-sized, clawing at the edges, some snapping off as they reached. Ryan stumbled, blood soaking his shirt, but she yanked him forward, their lungs burning. The creatures lunged in waves, one biting Mia's calf, its teeth like needles. She bashed its head with a rock, sobbing as it crumpled, but the pain slowed her. The hollow's edge was yards away when the ground erupted, a skeletal hand, massive and decayed, burst up, grabbing Ryan's leg. He screamed, hacking at it with his knife, bones splintering until it released him. They reached the car, slamming the doors as the horde swarmed the hood, claws screeching on metal. Mia floored it, tires spinning, the creature's bodies thudding under the wheels, brittle, hollow sounds like breaking twigs. The pit roared, a final gust sucking the things back, their wails fading as the hollow swallowed them. She drove, tears streaming, until the ravine was a speck in the mirror. Ryan's shoulder was shredded, Mia's leg bled, but they were alive. They burned their clothes, got stitches, and told no one, they'd sound insane. Months later, Mia found an old Ozark's tale. Black Pine Hollow was a plague pit, where a village dumped their sick children, sealing them alive. Locals swore the ground breathed, angry and hungry. One night, Mia woke to scratching at her window. She looked, nothing, but her yard bore a single handprint, small and skeletal, pressed into the dirt. She moved away, Ryan too, but the scars itch when it rains, and the whispers echo in their dreams. The hollow won't forget them, but it's done, for now.